We're here for an hour of Yin Yoga. So this is morning Yin. And if it's the first yoga class that you're doing today, or it might not be morning for you, it could be any time if you're watching this on YouTube, but you could take a few moments and gather some props up to make your life easier. If you've got yoga bolsters, that's what these are, these kind of weird pillows. I have a lot of different shaped yoga bolsters. This one's a rectangle. This one's an oval. I have some round ones and some other ones as well, but this is, I don't know. These are nice. If you don't have these, a couple of couch cushions, like these kinds, or little throw pillows, work pretty great. And you can also take like the back cushions or the bottom cushions off your couch if that's available, and use those as well. So I am going to start in child's pose, and I'm going to use the bolster underneath my chest so that I have a little bit of support. So you could easily do that with a handful of throw pillows or a couch cushion or two, or you can just do child's pose without any props. That would also work okay. So I also like to have a blanket underneath my shins so that there's just a little bit more support in here. And you can have, like, the cool part about doing child's pose with pillows and blankets is that you can keep the knee joint quite loose, quite wide. So you don't have to sit down so close to your heels in a child's pose when you're doing it with these pillows. So I'm going to show you what I mean. Kinda. I'll try to show you what I mean. So I'm going to smooth out my blanket so that there's not any wrinkles in it. And then I'm going to put my shins on the blanket so that the top of my ankle kind of goes right over the edge. And then the pillow I'm going to put underneath me. Now I'm going to take my knees a little wide, wider than my hips, maybe wider than my shoulders as well. And then you can go forward more like that to have a little less bend in your knee, or come backward more and have a little closer bend. You can go all the way back if your body allows for it until your hips meet your heels. And for some people that is going to be great. Now, I turn my head one direction for the first half, and then I'll turn it the other direction for the second half. And you might have to, like build up. There are yoga poses where I use 2 bolsters instead of just 1. So I have a lot of support. And you can do that as well. Build up your stack of cushions. Or throw pillows. And if this is just not your jam and you don't have enough throw pillows to make it comfortable, you can start in a different pose. And then just join us at the end for the next pose coming up. Oh. Usually I find this pose, it's a little, sometimes I can feel like the sensation of my knee being in the shape and a little bit of the pressure on the bonier, like, outcroppings on my knee, like where the bone of your femur might be quite pronounced at the bottom part of your knee, or the bone of the tibia might be a little bit pronounced. And so if that's the case, definitely put padding under those knees, because the blanket makes it a much softer situation. So if you're just feeling the bony surfaces of your knee or the top of your ankle pressing into the floor, that's really uncomfortable. So we're about halfway here, so I'm going to turn my head the other way. where for me this pose really starts to get lighter and get a little easier to be in. The first couple of minutes, all this tissue that lives right here in my attachments gets, it just takes time to sort of gently accommodate me. But that's all getting much lighter and much more comfortable. So we're gonna stay about another minute. But this is the part where I might like organize my arms differently, or I like to do this little side to side wobble and then pause again from time to time. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm talking the wrong direction. But in any case, hopefully you got all that. So we've got about 3 big breaths left. Now, I'm going to take myself away from the pose a little bit, and you can bring your knees in. And this is the point where if you chose something else instead of the child's pose, you can kind of join us up. Because we're going to do a frog pose. So I'm going to set that off to the side. And before I get to the frog, I'm going to do some of these little back and forth movements in my spine. Oh, I like to straighten one leg out and then just push back through the heel and roll over my toes a few times. Just to release that ankle joint. Oh. And my knee joint, actually. Sometimes just the pressure of being in that pose just feels nice to kind of rinse things out a little. Okay, so we're going to start our frog by laying down on the belly. And I'm going to start with, on my elbows, but I'm going to change that in a second. So you're going to pick a leg. It can go, either leg can start, but I'm going to start with my left leg. So we're going to hike the leg up so that the leg, if you looked out to the side, sort of resembles a little frog leg. And we're just going to do one side at a time. And you might be able to hike your knee up higher or stick your foot out farther. Or you might want them tucked back in a little bit, closer to the middle. So you're just going to experiment until it feels kind of interesting in your hip. And these are not meant to be super spicy. So if the pose feels really intense, you might even decide to back off a little bit. If the pose is just interesting, that's what we're looking for. We want some sensation, not necessarily a ton of sensation. This is not that kind of a practice. And then relax. The most important part is that you relax, right? So there's a little sensation in my hip socket here. There's more sensation on this side as I kind of gently try to release my hip flexor and the top of my quad. And I like to bend the knee and do this little thing from time to time. Now, some people may even want to reach back there and hold that foot. If it's close enough, you can certainly do that. Just make sure that the rest of the body is okay with that particular decision as well. Again, so for me, the first minute in a pose is sort of where I check in and say, is this the right amount of sensation? Do I want to change the angles a little bit? Do I want to do I want to increase the sensation? Do I want to decrease the sensation? So it's all just kind of what is feeling good to me in the moment. So sometimes I'll bring the knee up a little higher. I'll take the foot out a little wider. I'll tuck it in a little more. And so I'm just exploring. So now we're getting into this kind of, second half of this. We're getting towards that. And so this just is a different, now I'm really just trying to let go into it. things that we're looking for with yin is a kind of a much more subtle relationship with the sensations in our body, which is why we hang out with the poses for a while. One of the reasons we hang out with the poses for a while is that we can really kind of get to know the sort of changing landscape of sensation that's present in a pose. When we hold a pose just for a few seconds, we usually only notice the really, really spicy, intense things, or the amount of work that we're doing to maintain that pose. Whereas with this practice, we're really trying to notice all the layers. So we're going to stay here for about 30 more seconds. So take a really big breath. And then we're going to come back to the center with both legs. So I'm going to lean into the long leg, stretched out leg, and then I'm going to stretch out the leg I just had bent. And then just for a little bit, we're going to pause in a Sphinx pose. So we're going to just prop up on the elbows. And you can start with just a little bit of movement, right? A little bit of release. And then allow your legs to relax and see if you can feel a difference between the leg we just did in the frog and the other leg that we haven't done yet. And we're going to come back to the Sphinx again at the end of the second frog half, but just noticing sort of the subtle changes that may have occurred, even if the pose wasn't particularly spicy for you. One of the reasons I think sometimes people don't really get yin yoga is because they don't really have a practice of trying to pay attention to subtle things. And so the more we pay attention to subtle things, the more stuff there is to notice. And so I think it's a unique opportunity to sort of change the way our brain works, right? To actually become more attentive and to deepen our ability to stay present and stay attentive to things longer. And it shares that benefit with meditation. Good morning. So we're going to stay here for about 30 more seconds, and then we'll do the other leg. Now, I think you should be able to take a nice deep breath, kind of roll over to this side that we did before and bring this other leg up into your frog. What I am going to do, though, before I do that, is I'm just going to turn myself a little bit so that I give you a different angle to look at this in. So I'm going to rotate around. So I'm more on a diagonal here. In the event that maybe there was some subtlety that got missed, you'll be able to see a different angle on this, and then maybe it will help give you some other ideas. Okay, so again, I am gonna move some yoga props out of my way, but I'm gonna hike this leg up, and then kind of expand the knee away from me a little bit, and then see, right? Should I go out with the foot more? Should I keep the foot tucked in? Should I do less height with the knee or more? And then once I've got the hip position so that there's no pain in the hip joint, I don't want to feel burning sensation, numbness, tingling, or anything that I suspect is damage. Okay, sharpshooting pain, usually we jump right out of that because our nervous system is so arranged. But in any case, so once I feel like I've got the hip there, then I can let everything relax. And again, so for me, it's really nice. I don't do it the whole time, but just once or twice, especially near the beginning, kind of letting my long leg, trying to relax the hip flexors in the front edge of the hip on that long leg is very useful. And again, you could even reach back there with your hand and hold that foot. And then really, you know, let the hip flexor go. It sort of hybridizes the, becomes a bow and a frog had a baby kind of a pose. Sometimes for me, one hip is a little spicier or a little different than the other. It's interesting, again, to notice not just the sort of changing landscape within a shape, but also just noticing the landscape differences between your hemispheres, front and back, left to right, top to bottom. So we're going to stay for about 30 more seconds. So with your exhale, you'll just roll yourself a little bit away from that hip and straighten it out. And again, we're going to come back to our friend the Sphinx. Before we get there, it might be nice to just kind of give a little windshield wiper move to the legs, and then you can extend them out. Well, I'm trying to find some room for my feet. Elbows a little bit forward, slightly in from the shoulders helps my shoulders relax. So if I tuck my elbows in too tight, then my shoulders want to collapse towards my ears. If I put them out too wide, again, it feels like I want to collapse in. But if I bring them just slightly closer together than my shoulders and put them slightly forward of the shoulder, then the bones seem to just kind of hold themselves, and I can relax. And especially relax the back of the neck. And relax through the feet and legs as best you can. And we're going to stay here for about another minute. And take a nice big breath. And then we'll come down out of the Sphinx. Now, I like some little windshield wiper legs. Oh, feels good. You might want to go back to child's pose for a moment, or you might want to roll onto your back and do a little bit of a back release. You can also do some cat-cow shapes in between. And then eventually what's going to happen is we're going to all meet up in a seated position. So I'm going to take myself there. And then once I get to the seated position, kind of leaving a little bit of looseness here, I'm going to stick my heart forward and back So I'm doing the little cat shapes, but just seated, kind of rocking back and forth on the pelvis. It feels really nice in this kind of lumbar area to be really gentle right after the Sphinx. It's just, it's been in a position for a while of kind of supporting the body in that shape. And then some little washing machine moves feel really good too. All right. So we're going to come to a wide position that you might know as Upavista Konasana. In the Yin world, this is called Dragonfly. So we're sitting up and we've got the legs out in a V, and then you can add support. Now, some people, when the legs go wide, the pelvis goes backwards. That's a bone structure situation. And so one way to work with that is to do either sit up on the edge of a blanket and you want to put it right under the edge of your sit bones, or you can bend the knees and put support into the knees, whether it's a couple pillows, or in my case, I do a little rolled up blanket. And then that might allow you to get more onto the tip tops of your sit bones so that your pelvis will kind of hold itself up, okay? So your legs also don't have to be as wide as you can go. They can be wide, but not all the way to the edges of your range of motion to allow for some of that change. So I have a couple of yoga blocks here. I'm going to employ them in a moment. I'm going to also leave my pillows nearby. So we're going to stay sitting straight up. We're just going to rotate toward one of the legs. And I would suggest, see how far around you can rotate your torso. Just go all the way, like however far it'll let you go. And then pause at that point and let yourself sink into the sit bones a little deeper. And we're just going to stay here for a bit, just sitting in a twist. Now, one of the things that's really interesting to me that I have been exploring and experimenting with in the last little while is that sometimes, like, okay, so my head wants to turn about that much when I turn my eyes with my head, okay? And that's normally the way a twist works, right? Your eyes go there first, and then your head follows. But here's an interesting phenomenon. So my head, I'm turning my head towards, this is my left shoulder, towards my left shoulder. If I take my eyeballs and I look as far to my right as I can, and I keep my eyes looking to the right, as I turn my head to the left, I actually get my head around more than if I turn my eyeballs to the right and turn my head. And that's about as far as I can go. Whereas if I turn my eyes the other way, I can get just a tiny bit more twist there. Now that's weird. I find that fascinating. But in any case, and then I can just bring my eyes back with me. Once I'm here, I'm here. And I can also just relax the eyes. But there's some interesting things happening with the musculature of the back of the eye, or the nervous system, and the amount of range of motion. It's very intriguing to me. So we're going to stay here for about another 20 seconds. Now take a big breath. And we're going to unwind the twisty part. And then we're going over the leg. So you can go over the leg forward like this, or you can go over the leg sideways like this, or even with this arm in a bound position behind your back. So heading this direction. And if you've got some pillows, you can build a yoga Stonehenge that you can rest on. You might just need some some extra pillows or some extra props. Right? You might even build like an entire stack so that you can relax your head easily. make sure that I've got like just the inklings of sensation. I've gone to a place where I'm like, oh yeah, I feel that. And for me, feeling that means I'm getting a stretch on the back of this thigh, this leg's thigh, which is the hamstring area. And I'm also getting some nice spiciness down this inner thigh. So that means, yeah, I did this. Like, I'm just right. If I feel like I'm pulling my joints apart, or I feel like I'm tensing up as a result of the pose, then I want to back off a little bit, put in some more props, or just not go as far. And if the sensation lightens, like it just disappears, sometimes that happens. You feel it when you first get here, and then as you stay here, the tissue releases, and there's some hydration that happens in that tissue, some interesting magical things occur. Then you can go a little deeper, right? So the hamstring stretch for me on the back of my thigh has dissipated. So I could potentially surf on in here a little farther. I might also choose not to do that and just to stay where I was. But making that choice, so we're going to stay for about 30 more seconds here. All right, so you're going to take a big breath. You're going to let go with a big sigh. And then we're going to inhale our way up. And once we get here, we're going to pause for a moment and notice. And lean back a little. And bend the knees. And give it a bit of a rinse. Now we've got one more pose kind of in this sequence before we do the other side. I am going to leave this blanket where it is. But we're going to bend, so the leg that I was going over, that leg is going to be on top. I'm going to bend this guy, and then I'm going to bring this guy in front or on top. So if I can bring either the knee on top of the knee or the shin on top of the shin, that's kind of the direction in which we're going. Either when I look down, I have a square here where my thighs and the top of my thigh make as close to a parallel, like a 90-degree situation as possible. Or when I look down, I see a triangle where my knees are coming together, okay? Because either of those arrangements, depending on your bone structure, some people will find it more with one than the other, and some people will find one impossible and the other one possible. But in any case, when I look down, I want to see like a narrow situation with the thighs. If the knees are wider than the hips, then we're not going to get the sensation in the same area. So to the degree possible, we're bringing this in. You can straighten out the bottom leg and just have the top leg on top, okay? Or have the top leg in that position. So what I have done here is I have put a block in front so that I can let my shin rest at a different angle. That gets my thighs in this narrow position, and it keeps my ankle joint from pressing into the tender tissue on the top of my thigh. And I find this a little more pleasant in general. And so folding forward, you might be able to put your elbows out here in front of you and rest the whole body on the floor. Or you may find that like your knee is higher, or there's no going forward here. And so you can sit upright, or you can lean slightly forward. You can even lean slightly backward, as the case may be. If we're feeling anything in this outer hip region, even all the way up to this glute, that's what we're doing. So this is this one that I'm doing right here, where the legs are in a square shape, is called the square pose in Yin. And when the knees are on top of each other, it's called shoelace, because it's kind of like your legs are overlapping like a pair of laces. And so there are different names for these shapes in the other realms of the yoga world. You might know them as Gomukhasana, or this pose might be called double pigeon or fire logs. The reason that I think, this is my take on it, the reason I think they renamed things in Yin is because they wanted us to come with a kind of a fresh perspective on what these poses were supposed to be. A lot of the baggage that we carry around with us in yoga, asana practice anyway, especially in the States, I think, is this kind of weird thought that poses have to be done a certain way or have to look a certain way in order to qualify as that pose. And so there's this kind of imposition on the body to try to make these shapes happen. And I don't particularly support that particular approach to yoga asana. I think there's some basic things that make one pose and another pose, but I think you can approach poses very creatively, and work with them so that you feel the sensation in the areas that we're looking to target without having to impose on your body. Impose, get it? Anyway. Every now and then I find my puns funny, but I'm sure no one else does. So we're hanging out in this little shape for a little bit longer, about another 2 breaths. And then we're going to do 1 more minute, but we're going to change it up a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually come more upright, and then the leg that's on the bottom, I'm going to stretch that guy out a little bit. So this leg that's on top, I'm going to lean sideways in this direction, so that as that hip gets a little heavier, there's a little bit more sensation on that outer hip. Oh. And I've got a block under my elbow, and some people will be able to put their elbow on the floor, or you might need like a couple of pillows here. Or even a chair. Like I've used a chair very effectively to make a yoga prop happen. Or the couch. Like the edge of the couch would be good as well. You might just have to turn yourself around a little bit. So we're going to take 2 more big breaths here. Alright, so use that arm to help you out. We're going to lean back. We're going to undo the legs. Oh. I'm going to come back to this kind of, very gentle cat-cow sort of circumstance. Just letting my body kind of readjust. So we're going back out into our V shape, and we're going to do the opposite, the whole thing again, but on the other side. So first things first, I'm going to get my little sit bones out from under me. I'm going to try to get stable in this V, and then I'm going to turn, and I'm going to start at my belly button, okay, and then turn my upper back, and I'm going to turn my eyes the opposite direction, try to hold them there as I turn my head. It's so difficult to turn your head while looking the opposite direction, and then let your eyes kind of follow your head. Just see if it works for you. It's very interesting to me. Oh, I need to sit up a little taller. I'm just noticing that. You may choose not to turn your head as far, or you might choose not to turn your torso as far, or you might turn more. I'm trying to kind of weight up my sit bones. So if I was kind of leaning in one direction, I'm noticing that and trying to shift my weight more to a neutral position and trying to kind of reconfigure my space here so my arms can rest. I'm noticing quite a different landscape in my upper back turning this way than I did the other way. This whole shoulder blade is quite different. And again, that's one of these things that we're doing with Yin Yoga is we're trying to bring ourselves to a place where we're really noticing the little details. And if you're not normally a detail-oriented person, and you generally paint things in broad strokes, it's a unique opportunity to practice this way. So we've got about another 45 seconds with what we're up to. We're going to take a nice big breath. And then as you exhale, we're going to fold forward over this leg. And again, you can fold forward, or sideways forward. That's up to you. And again, you can build the mountain of props, which I'm definitely going to do. Or you can just hang out, just wherever you landed. I'm liking this opportunity to rest my head here. Make sure that you're taking, nice, smooth breaths. I like to make mine a little deeper than I would breathe on kind of my natural breath every time I think about it. For you, it might be more appropriate to just let the breath be natural. But I find the breath does some really interesting things. One is it tends to help relax the tissue, especially the places that are spicier. And it also gives me a place to root my attention with my mind, which I enjoy. So we're going to stay for about another minute here. Mm-hmm. So we're going to take a big deep breath and then let go with an you're going to inhale your way up. And then we're going to bend the knees and lean back and rinse out a little bit. Okay, so when you're ready, we're going to come into our square pose slash shoelace on the opposite side. And again, you're setting yourself up with the props that seem appropriate to you. One side might be quite different than the other side. Don't be surprised if you have one hip that feels a little more sensitive or one shoulder that's a little more sensitive, to being moved forward. To the degree possible, we're going to try to let some space develop in the back of the neck. And if it feels like you could benefit from it, go in here with your fingers and massage these two little ridgy places right in the back here. So there is a cranial nerve that originates in the brainstem called the vagus nerve or vagus nerve, depending on who pronounces it. Now, I pronounce it vagus nerve because the root word is also the root word for vagabond, which is why the nerve is called that, because it seems to wander through the body and has lots of different impacts. And it is responsible for a large percentage of our ability to remain in a parasympathetic state, which means in a restful, peaceful state. Now, sometimes we talk about the nervous system as if there's only two things happening. There's the fight or there's the flight, but really our nervous system is more complicated than that. And there's another aspect, which is the freeze response. And so sometimes you'll see it described that way: fight, flight, freeze. Well, I think it's 4 different qualities. Fight, flight is kind of one, right? That's the sort of sympathetic, I'm either going to take the response to stress that I'm going to hold my ground, or I'm going to take a response to stress that I'm going to flee and try to get away from it. The freeze response is a response of overwhelm. And I'm just going to shut down and hope that this is over soon. And then there's a response, which is the relaxation response. Our nervous systems are much more complicated, I think, sometimes than some of the things that we are led to believe. We do some kind of tertiary, the kind of instruction in those things that I would get as an average human on the planet Earth. But there's an interesting aspect to the vagus nerve, and the thing that is interesting that I'm learning recently is that the vagus nerve actually has, because there's pairs of cranial nerves, and the vagus nerve is a pair of nerves, and one of them seems to move forward into the body towards the throat and then down the front body, and the other seems to move towards the back of the body and down. And the one that's in the back of the body seems to kind of largely intersect, at least where we can sort of feel the sensation on the outer body with these ridges on the back of the skull. Okay, so by the way, we've got about 45 more seconds in this pose, so in case you were wondering, and then we're going to do a little side bend for a minute. But in any case, so one of the things that's really interesting, and some of the really interesting research in the vagus nerve that's going on right now, and some of the conclusions that are being drawn that are still kind of being, considered, is that the front part of the vagus nerve is, when that is active and when it is balanced and toned, it helps us feel connected to each other. It helps us feel peaceful and a part of things and able to deeply connect with ourselves and with others. Take a big breath, lift up, and then we're going to bend sideways away from the bottom hip, okay? So when the back vagus nerve, the dorsal part of this nerve pair, is restricted, and this can be caused by even tension in the neck, it makes us feel distant from others. It makes us feel unable to communicate, and it tends to be kind of that freeze response is in some ways coming from a lack of tone or a tension that is being created in this dorsal aspect of the vagus nerve, which I think is fascinating and has fascinating implications for yoga practice. And just really interesting stuff in terms of like what we do with the neck in different poses, how we might use the eyes, because the eyes, the 4 pairs of cranial nerves that are responsible for that relaxation response, one of them goes to the back of the eye and controls dilation of the pupil and the movement in the eye to some degree. And so how we position the mouth, how we position the eyes, how we position the neck are all really interesting. They have interesting ramifications to how we experience our yoga practice. And if yoga, remember the word yoga, means to unite, to connect, to join together, if we're trying to engender a feeling of connection in yoga, even if it's over this interweb situation, then we have to address this kind of tension and release and the front and back body relationships. We're going to take a big breath. And we're going to come all the way up out of here. We're going to lean back and unpretzel everything. Oh, I'm not sure that I have any answers for you guys yet. But what I am doing right now in my own practice is noticing, like, when I give myself permission to massage the areas in my neck where I often find tension, especially for me, this trapezius area, right? If you kind of reach up here and grab this muscle right here on the top of your shoulder, if that muscle is tighter on one side than the other, and mine always is, I've always got this, one side is like, I can barely get that muscle up off my back, and on the other side it's quite squishy. So that indicates that I could do some more work. And in fact, there might be some really interesting things that I want to play with in my twisting practice and in my side bending practice that help me kind of come to a place where there is a more even release across my upper back and across my neck. And maybe it would be a really good idea every day to do some things that allow me to release tension from that area. I may not be able to go get a massage right now, which is usually my answer to this whole thing. But I can do some things for myself in my practice to release tension from my back body that help me relax in general and help me connect with the people that I'm around, or with, just the sense that I'm part of a community. Even if there's no people in my home, I might still want to feel that community connection. So with that in mind, we're going to do a pose. I'm not going to use these blocks. I'm just getting them out of my way. But we're going to do a pose that lifts us up a little bit and sort of releases the tension from the front body. And we're going to want to make sure the neck is in good position. So we're going to do that in a butterfly shape, reclining. And then we'll turn this into Shavasana. So I'm going to keep this rolled up blanket because that's going to go underneath my legs. And then I'm going to take a couple of pillows or a bolster. And in my case, I'm going to use a bolster. But if you don't have a bolster, you can use a couple pillows. So one pillow is going to go under your upper back, and you can let your head hang backwards. But my preference would be, in this particular regard, to just have a little bit of support under your head. So the way that I'm going to create that is I'm going to do this bolster long ways. So my spine goes over it, and I'm probably going to use a blanket. It depends on how it feels, but I'm probably going to use a blanket underneath me. So the thing about this bolster is it's a little softer, a little squishier. It's closer, more akin to the like the little throw pillows that you might have at your house if you don't have a bolster. Okay, so I'm coming down this way, and then I'm going to grab the end of this guy, and I'm going to bring him down. And I usually like the bolster to start about where the bottom rib is, right? You can sometimes, like, this bolster's a little softer, so I could let it come all the way to my sacrum. But I usually find it a little more comfortable to have it a little higher. So then I'm going to pull this blanket in really tight against my little hips. Okay, they're not so little, but in any case, I like to think of them as being diminutives because it's cuter. Okay, so laying here, I feel pretty good. Actually, I don't feel like I need to have support under my head. But if it felt like my chin was lifting like that, then for me, that extra blanket would be helpful, okay? So I want the back of my neck and my shoulders to feel like they're able to relax here. I don't want it to be too aggressive because we're going to stay for a pretty good amount of time, about 4 minutes or so now. We've been here for a little bit, kind of checking things out. Oh. And especially, I want to try to let my upper back and my neck just really sink into the support. So you might even take a couple blankets or something like that to kind of build your support up so you've got the right amount. Try to relax any tension. And sometimes it feels better to me to like take the arms out like a cactus, or sometimes it feels good to have them over my head. So you can kind of experiment with, where should my arms go? Should my palms face the floor? Should my palms face the ceiling? Ooh, that's kind of nice. Because just readjusting the arm bone can change the tone of the muscle in the upper back, and you might find one that creates more of a sense of release than another. Sometimes even, this is really interesting to me, if I've got blocks handy, so you could also use pillows, but if I take my arm and position my prop so that my wrist is supported, so that there's a little bit of an angle, sometimes that's more comfortable. And so you can experiment. And then try to find something that feels like, okay, yeah, that's the best one so far. Whatever that one might be. And let go. Relax the mouth. Because one of those pairs of cranial nerves winds up around the mouth. Relax the eyes. And then try to imagine both that the throat softens. Right? So there's a sense of the throat kind of dropping back into the support structure of the bones of the neck. And then that all of this tissue on the back of the head is allowed to drop back into the props. Stay for one more minute, yogis. So we're going to take a nice big breath. We're going to let go with a really big and then we're going to bring the knees together, and you could do these little windshield wiper things. Now you've got to get what's underneath your, well, you don't gotta, but I'm going to suggest that we take out the stuff that's underneath us here. I'm going to keep a blanket because I really enjoy, when I do Shavasana, having a blanket under my head. And again, I think the reason I find it so pleasant is for the same reason that I was kind of talking about earlier. So if I take a blanket and put it under my head, and I take the edge of the blanket and just sort of cup it. I grab the little edges and just kind of cup it right up against the back of my neck, and then allow that to relax. That supports these little occipital ridges on the back of my skull in such a beautiful way. And I have this knob on the back of my skull that apparently, according to a show I saw on PBS, indicates that I am in possession of some Neanderthal DNA. But in any case, so I've got my caveman throwback, which explains why I have trouble using my iPhone. And then I have this kind of cup supporting those little occipital ridges under my neck. And that makes my whole pose much softer. And it allows me to really release tension from my body. And then Shavasana really does become an opportunity for me to drop deeper, 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 deeper into the support of the earth, right? Now, I'm in my home, and there are layers of things between me and the actual earth, but the earth is there. She's under there somewhere, supporting me. And so if I can allow my body to deeply release into that support, then the sensation of this is that I release some of that pressure from that back side of my body that's responsible in some ways for my feelings of fear or insecurity or disconnect. And if I can engender softness in the front side of my body, that engenders my feelings of love, connection, and support and kindness. It's just fascinating. So allow yourself to feel those kind of supports put underneath you so that you can truly relax into this final pose. And we can truly let go of all the cares and worries that we haul around on those shoulders. Now, yogis, if you would like to just lay here for the rest of the morning, I am not going to stop you. But here we find ourselves at the 11 o'clock point, or pretty close to the 11 o'clock point. And again, there's this movement going on right now in the world. It started with Earth Day, but it is, as far as I know, ongoing. And I'm doing it for gosh, I don't know until I forget about it, but I try to remind myself. So every time the clock strikes a 1, so 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock, a.m., p.m., we pause for a moment and do the following 3 mental exercises, the following 3 blessings of meditation. So first, bless yourself by reminding yourself of the things that you have in your life to be grateful for. And so try to fill your heart with that sense of gratitude for the beauty that unfolds even in challenge, right? And even maybe can you feel grateful for the challenges that life presents us, because challenges are how we grow, both as a human individual and as a society and a people. When we rise from the ashes of challenge, we usually come out better. And so feeling grateful for the opportunities to learn and to grow and for the beautiful blessings around us. And then with your heart really full of gratitude, can you send out a blessing of healing and vitality to all the beings of the world? So the beings that are, the human beings that are currently suffering from the virus that we're struggling with as a populace, can we send out healing energy and a sense of health and vitality to all of them so that they can recover, as many as are suffering? And can we send out a blessing of healing and vitality to everyone, regardless of circumstance, and also all the beings on the planet, so that the beings of the ocean and the beings of the earth and the beings in the trees can all experience health and vitality. And then the last blessing is for the earth herself. And can we imagine the earth as an abundant, beautiful garden, a veritable Garden of Eden, over the entire surface of the planet, so that all beings everywhere have the appropriate ecosystem within which to live a happy and long life. So with those blessings in hand, we're going to stretch ourselves out. And bring ourselves together. And give it a little massage and some love. And then you might like to rock yourself up. I am a fan of rolling to the side and taking a moment to sort of collect myself mentally before sitting up. So thanks for joining me for this foray into Yin Yoga. Take a big breath together, yogis. Nice big inhale. And a big deep sigh. Namaste. May you experience health and vitality in your own life.